I want to welcome you to the KVEC Special Education Winter Conference. My name is Dion Bates, and I'm the Implementation and Improvement Lead here at KVEC in the Special Education Department. So thank you for your participation, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kraft.
Good morning, guys. Like Dion said, we're going to be talking about progress monitoring in reading and writing. So we want to be looking at, these are our learning intentions for today. The first thing that we're going to look at is defining the progress monitoring process, what that is. And we're going to go through the process specifically in reading and writing. And then also we're going to practice implementing the steps of progress monitoring using our reading and writing goals. So we want to do the whole, just get you a full picture on what progress monitoring would look like in reading and writing. As we go on later, there will be a few activities that for you to have the opportunity to practice. So if you can have some paper and pencil ready, just have it handy for when we get to those, that would be great. It doesn't need to be anything, just some scrap paper enough to do some activities with. Okay, so the first thing that we want to look at is what is progress monitoring. This definition came straight from our IEP guidance document. As you can see the picture of it right here, and this is actually a link. This document, if you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend that you use the link to have it saved to your desktop or have it bookmarked. And then also it would be good to have a hard copy, because this will help guide you pretty much through any section of developing your IEP and any questions that you may have concerning the IEP or process and anything like that. But the definition, and I copied it straight from the IEP guidance document, it says it's the ongoing process of collecting and analyzing data to determine student progress toward specific skills or general outcomes outlined in the measurable annual goals in order to make appropriate instructional decisions. A progress monitoring system includes the tools and methods used to collect, graph, and analyze that data used to measure student progress on annual goals. And that seems like a lot of information for that, but to summarize what that definition means is basically when you're providing specially designed instruction for your students after your goal is written, then you are using assessments to give them assessments, collect that data, and it gives you a picture of how that student is progressing or not. And based on the information you come up with, it helps make those instructional decisions so that you can help make adjustments and help them meet their goals. And we'll go more into that as we go through this. So the purposes of progress monitoring is to measure and report progress toward those annual goals. And it's not only just, we have to do it at the end of each grading period, whether it's the 6 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever your district, whatever policy your district follows as far as when they send out report cards. But also when you're talking to parents, then you can give them specifically where they are. And I learned this because when I first started teaching, I wasn't real proficient on being able to collect my data and fully understand what that was. So when I would talk to parents about their kids, I was, oh yeah, they're doing good. They're doing good. They're making progress. They're making good progress. And I mean, I had the work and the assessments that I knew that they were making progress, but being able to relay that information to the parents is where I kind of fell short. So what that ended up happening is sometimes the parents were like, well, okay, well, Chastity said that they were doing good, so why are they struggling so much in the classroom? So if you have that hard data, those numbers, and you can show them specifically where they are, then it will help them get a bit better picture. And also if a student is, if the parents think that they're not really doing as well as they thought they were, if they're showing growth and they have a low number to start with, then they can actually see they started out with a 30% and now they're doing a 50. Yeah, they're still not where they need to be, but look at the growth that they have. So it's really makes it more visual and more clear for the parents, for them to get an actual picture of how their kid is doing. And also it determines the effectiveness of instructional services. So if you're implementing your SDI and you're doing these strategies and you're assessing your kids and they're not making any progress, then that tells you that that strategy is not effective. Okay, so then it leads you to the next one. It guides instructional decisions and make adjustment to the SDI. So after you determine that that strategy may not be effective, then it helps guide on what decisions need to be made and what adjustments do you need to do to help your student start to make progress toward their goal. And then it also helps determine the present level of academic or behavior performance. This is going to be helpful for, first of all, you know where they are, so you'll know where to start teaching. And also when you're writing your IEP on your present level performance. This is crucial to let them know on that present level under, if it's academic or under the social emotional with the behavior piece, it tells you exactly where they are. And that's beneficial for you and anybody else who may read that IEP, because a lot of times students transfer from school to school and district to district. And so anybody can pick that up if you have those percentages and that information, and they can pick that IEP up and just start going with it. The next one is provide data for the reevaluation process. So when you have a kid that's in reeval, you do sometimes you do new testing and you get the Y or the WISC and all of those things, all of those formal testing, but also this progress monitoring data, if it's when you do this and record it and analyze it, that's going to give you a true picture of how that student is performing in the classroom, in the resource room, day in and day out, all in the school setting. So it really gives you a clear picture of how that student is performing. And then lastly, you can use it to determine if the student continues to meet eligibility for special education and needs SDI. If you are providing this instruction for students and they're meeting their goal, and then you make instructional changes and take away the supports and take away scaffolds and they're still meeting their goal, you may see that they may not need special education, or that when you're making instructional changes, you're having to provide more support and you're having to continue to do that SDI, and then they are doing well and that they're doing well because of the SDI, then that will help determine that yes, they do need continued specially designed instruction and special education services. So it paints a really pretty picture of everything that you need to do for your student. Okay, so now let's talk about our methods of measurement. So at the top, I just copied the definition from the previous slide and then I want to focus on the part, this blue part here. It's in the definition for progress monitoring. It says a progress monitoring system includes the tools and methods used to collect, analyze the data that's used to measure the student progress and annual goals. So this is where your methods of measurement come in. And we have they're categorized into 4 different ones. We have curriculum-based measurement, direct measure, indirect measure, and authentic assessment. Those are your 4 categories. Now, also, I think with the new in Infinite Campus, just want to make a quick reference so that because it can be confusing. Before, you have a drop-down box that you could choose these methods of measurement, but I think with the current update, you only have 3 choices, and it's under frequency, latency, and event recording. So one thing to keep in mind is you're still using these type of measures, but if you are counting, like in these cases that we're getting ready to go over, you are counting how many times a student got something correct, whether it be the words correct or how many lines that they got correct, or how many punctuation, how many of those were correct. So anytime that you're counting counting something that they got correct, it's going to fall under that frequency, the frequency recording. So with these, you're still going to use these measurements, but it would fall under the frequency recording in your Infinite Canvas. Okay, so let's look at the first one, which is curriculum-based measurement. So all of these are specific examples for reading and writing, but I wanted to show you what these actually look like, because I'm sure you may have heard these terms before, but you really don't know exactly what that looks like or even how to use them. So the first one, let's look at the Oral Reading Fluency Probe. So this is a website that I want you guys to write down, Easy CBM. If you do not have it already, I want you to make yourself an account, because it's free, and this is going to be a lifesaver for you to help you with your progress monitoring. Okay, so you sign in and you have a lot of different things that you can do here, but what we want to focus on is measures. So you go here and you can do whatever grade level, K through 8. It does not go to the high school, but if a student is in high school and they have an IEP, chances are they're not reading on the high school level anyway, so you could still use this because what you're doing is assessing what their current reading level is or what their goal is. So it's K through 8. So it's already on first grade, so we'll just use this as an example. It will assess letter names, letter sounds. You can do phoneme segmenting, word reading fluency, and passage reading fluency. And it also has math also down there that you can use. So let's look at this one just to kind of show you what it is. So word reading fluency, you have a student copy, and it just looks like this. So you're going to hand this to them. Okay, then you have your copy. So it even has directions at the top for how to administer this little assessment. It's 60 seconds, 1 minute, really quick. If you have a small group, what I would do when I use this in my classroom is I would give the students something, and it would be different. I would have them pair up and work on something together, or just this will be time for them to do some independent work or to pair up and do some work together. And then I will pull them one at a time and let them read to me for 1 minute. Okay, so you would just set your timer and then they would start reading. And then as they read through, if they miss it, you just draw a line through it you just tell them to read till the timer goes off and then they stop. These numbers on the side is just a count of how many words that they have so that you don't have to go through and count them all. So if they read all the way down to the word why, then, at the end, if they made it to the end, that was 40 words. Well, they got to why. So they read 39 words per minute. That's it. It takes a minute. Then also what I like about this too, is you see there's different ones. Okay. So then one of the questions that I've had is like, well, if you give the student the same list, are they going to just memorize the order and not necessarily memorize the word? Well, what you can do is you can mix it up. So like today, you could give them the 1.1, and then next week you could give them the 1.2, and so on and so forth, or mix it up. Because if your goal is first grade, all of these are first grade level. So it doesn't have to be the same one. Okay, I want to show you the passage reading fluency, and then and we'll just skip on down to this one. So this is the student copy. You can print these out. This is what the student is going to see, and you're just going to tell them that again, it's a minute. Here is your copy, and it gives you the directions at the top, and then they start reading, and then these numbers on the side tell how many words are in that line, so you can count them easily. We will actually practice this later. I just want to kind of get you familiar with this website and what these oral reading fluency probes look like and the methods of measurement. So that's an example of an oral reading fluency probe. The reading comprehension probe is another one that you can use to measure, of course, comprehension. And I want to show you these because I think this is very helpful. Again, this is a free service. You can, the account is free. You just sign up. So readworks.org is a resource that you can use. So with this one, what you can do is you can go to find content. Okay, so you click on that. And what's really cool about this one is you can search by what kind of content you want. You could do articles, you could do reading passages, and also it's by grade level. So if you're working on, if your student is a 7th grader, but their goal is to read a 5th grade passage, then you can click 5th grade and it gives you a list of all 5th grade passages. Then if you're wanting to look at inferring, then you just click inferring, and that will be, you can do all of them. Or if you just want to assess the main idea or just assess the thing, you could click on that. And then when you go to print, then it will print questions to target that skill. So this one is a really good website that you can use, a really good resource and to help you with your reading comprehension probes. Now, the next one, and I am taking the time to go into these because I do think this is very beneficial for you guys to be able to have these resources to go to and to use for your progress monitoring. Because what I have found is when I do talk to teachers is some of them understand the process, but they don't really know what to use. So I do want to show you this one, a written expression probe. This is interventioncentral.org. It also has this one. Intervention Central covers all content areas as well as behavior. The one I want to focus on right now is a written expression probe generator that you can use. This is super cool. You can type in a title if you want to, type in a story starter of whatever you want it to be, or you can click on over here and choose one. So if you have something specific that a writing prompt that they need to respond to, you can type that in. Or if you're just wanting something, that doesn't matter, then you can click on here and then you can download it. And when you open it, it makes an actual probe that you can print and hand out to them. And then you can time it. And there you have your written expression probe, CDM, that you can use to progress monitoring your writing goals. Super cool. I love it. So I wanted to share that one with you. The other one is a checklist. So that's all your CDMs that we're going to talk about. The next one is Direct Measure, and it is a checklist. Now, if you notice, there's a checklist that's listed under Direct Measure, and then there's also one that's listed under an Indirect Measure. So we'll talk about the differences in those. And if you look at in parentheses in the Direct Measure, it has the observed behavior. And then in the indirect, it's a permanent product. So the difference between that is if it's a direct measure, that means you are actually observing the student performing that task or performing that skill. So let's click on this and let's look at what this might look like. So this is just a general example of what you can use. So this could be a checklist. Now, to make it a direct measure, what you would do is you would have this student look at these boxes and say that I wanted him to read the box in the closed syllable. As he is actually reading them, I am listening to him reading them. I can see that he is pronouncing jacket correctly or incorrectly. And I just check that off or mark if he gets it correct or incorrect. So that would be your direct measure. So I'm going to go over to the indirect one now and show you the difference. So a permanent product. So this would be an example of an indirect checklist for so with paragraph writing. Okay. So with this one, it would be a student there at some point they wrote a paragraph. You gave them the assignment and they wrote it. So you're going to take their paper and set their paper beside this checklist and, well, kind of graded, I guess, for example. So you're going to look for these things in that paper. So you didn't actually observe the student writing it as he was completing it. You looked at it later, the product that he produced, and you're measuring your checklist compared to the assignment. So that's the difference. The next one, an indirect measure, would be a rubric. And this is, there are many different ones, but I just want to kind of give you an example. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but it's really, as long as it's measured what you're looking for. So this is just an example of an organizational rubric for paragraphs. And you can, as you see, you can label it 1, 2, 3, and 4, developing, approaching, meets or exceeds the expectations, and what that's going to look like, a little description of what those are going to look like. So when the student completes the writing, if you're looking at their organization, then you read these and you're going to categorize the writing into one of those 4 categories. And we'll talk a little bit more about being able to quantify those and to be able to plot those on your graphs. We'll get into that in just a little bit. I just wanted to show you what that's going to look like. So that's just an example of a rubric. Okay. And then some other examples would be a teacher interview, teacher made tests. And then the last one is authentic assessment. And this could be done with a student interview, work samples, and a portfolio. But keep in mind that if you use the authentic assessment as a method of measurement, you have to use one of these other measurements with it. The authentic assessment cannot stand alone. So keep that in mind when you're choosing those assessments. Progress monitoring, I think, can be, it sounds very daunting, I think, because it is an ongoing process, and it's kind of scary, I think, for some people, and it was for me when you just don't understand it. So to look at it, I think that progress monitoring is kind of cyclical. You can break it down into 5 steps. So this is, of course, after you've gotten your goal written. So that's when the progress monitoring starts. So you have your goal and it's written, you've got your method of measurement in there, you know where the student is, which is the baseline, you know where you want to take them, which is your goal, you know how you're going to assess that. That's going to be your method of measurement. All that's been established. And then we get to this part. So to look at it, the first thing that you're going to do is start providing the SDI. You're going to teach them and work with them and provide that assistance. And then you're going to assess the students and collect that data. After you collect it and get your scores, you're going to graph them. Okay, after you graph it, then you analyze it. And I think that's a piece that is more difficult for people. Is I do, just based on what I've seen so far, that is you can, for the most part, people understand how to get those scores and then they graph them and make a graph out of them, but really looking at analyzing what that data is telling you. And basically what you want to do is just explain what you're looking at. What is this graph? What does that mean? What is it telling you? And we'll get into that also later on. And then after you analyze it and you say, oh, okay, this is what this is telling me. Susie is not making any progress, or Susie had a bad day and this happened. Once you do that, then you make your instructional decisions based on what you realized that your data is telling you. So you make instructional decisions, and once you make that change, then you start back over. You start providing that SDI, then you continue with the data or collecting the data and so on and so forth. So it's really, if you think of it like that, I think that's a more simple way to look at it, so it's not as daunting. Okay, so we're going to look at a reading goal. So I'm going to take you through a reading goal and take you through this progress monitoring process. But I want to take you through the reading one and model this for you so that you have an example of what this is going to look like. So let's just take Emily here. It says, when Emily is presented with a 5th grade passage, or when presented with a 5th grade passage, Emily will fluently read 195 correct words per minute across 3 consecutive probe sessions measured by a weekly oral reading fluency probe, which is a curriculum-based measure, which would fall under your frequency recording in Infinite Campus. And I just gave you some baseline information here that her baseline was 105 correct words per minute. Now, I also wanted to show you how, we came up with the goal of 195 and where that puts her. So let's look at our oral reading fluency norms chart. So you come here and you scroll down, and here is fluency chart. Okay, so Emily is reading, we're working in 5th grade. Her baseline was 100, she's a 7th grader. Her baseline was 105 words. So between that, she fell between 10 to 25 percentile. And that's what this category is right here in the 5th grade. So what we were looking at, if we go here, this would be the spring. I keep going back. So you have fall, winter, and spring. So by the spring of 5th grade, they exit 5th grade, you want your 5th graders reading 195 words per minute. That would put them in the 90th percentile. So we want to try to raise Emily. She's fallen here. We want to try to get her at least to the 90th percentile in the 5th grade so she can move forward and try to close that gap for her. So that's how I determined the 195 words. So this fluency chart is very helpful when you're looking at reading fluency. Okay, so this is our reading goal. Now, before we get into looking at graphing and assessing and things like that for our progress monitoring, here are some key terms that you need to be familiar with when you're doing your goal and your progress monitoring. The first one is baseline, and I've already kind of mentioned that already. So what baseline is the student's current performance of a skill or strategy in measurable terms. And that's the key word. It's measurable. For example, with Emily, her current performance was 105 correct words per minute in reading fluency. And I know this because I gave her a 5th grade curriculum-based measure, and that's what she scored. And we can measure that. Sometimes you don't want to see things like Emily is doing okay in reading, and she will improve her reading to, those are, you cannot measure those. The words improve, increase, you cannot really measure those. So we want specific levels and numbers of where the student is. And the reason for a baseline, it's gathered so that comparisons can be made after implementing that specially designed instruction. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier, is when you're looking at the progress of a student, it's hard, especially if a student is really far behind their same age peers, to compare them to the same age peers as far as the progress that they're making. So for example, using Emily again as an example, she's making progress in her 5th grade passage, while her same age peers are on 7th grade level. So compared to that, she is still 2 grade levels behind. But if you have that 105 words, correct words per minute, and she is making progress and increasing to 110, 115, and then by the end, if she gets to 170, and then you can look and say, man, she's still, she's in the 5th grade, she's still behind. Well, if you look at where she started and where she is at 175, then that's very encouraging. It's encouraging for you, it's encouraging for her and to the parents and anybody else who has an invested interest in Emily to know that she is making progress. And it's exciting, really, when you look at it. So that's why it's important to have that baseline. And then you have your goal. So your goal is the desired performance that's been established for that student to achieve within 1 year of an IEP cycle. So keep in mind is when you're making your goal, you want to make it attainable for that student. You don't want to, like, for example, if Emily was in the 10th percentile of 5th grade, I would not want to make her goal to be in the 50th percentile of 7th grade in 1 year. It's just not feasible for her. So you want to make sure that your goal is something that is going to be challenging, but also attainable. And then the next one is aim line. The aim line is your desired rate of progress that you want your student to move from the baseline to the performance criterion. So, for example, well, and then at the bottom it says that it connects the baseline to the IEP goal. And then it's, so that's what it does. And then when you have that line on your graph, then you can, it gives you a visual of that progress that you can see that they're going towards. So that's the desired rate. And I bolded that one because going on to the next one of your trend line, that's the actual rate of progress. So the aim line is what you want them to do because it's going to be a gradual increase. The baseline is 105, and then in 2 weeks later, she's not going to have 195. So it's going to be a gradual increase. So when you have that desired rate, it also gives you a guide that they're on track to meet their goal. The trend line is the actual rate of progress that will also show you, are they truly on path to meet their goal, or are they trending down, or what needs it, and it helps you adjust your SDI, which we will also get into in a little bit. And the last one is an instructional change. So that one is a vertical line that's drawn on your graph, and it's after the last data point of the previous intervention. So you're doing interventions, you need to make an instructional change, you draw a vertical line and mark it on your graph. So those are some key terms as we go through and talk about this. Okay, so here, when we draw an aim line, there's just 4 steps. First, you establish a baseline. Number 2, determine your goal. Number 3, plot those points on a graph. And 4, connect the dots. It's kind of simple. The aim line is easy. And I know when you use Infinite Campus, when you put your scores in, Infinite Campus does all the graphing for you. But we want to take you through this process today because we want you to understand what those lines are and what that's telling you. And be able, if you're able to draw them yourself, and then if it's done automatically, you can still look at that and analyze it, and then be able to explain that to the parents as well. And that would, it helps bridge that communication with those parents that they can be able to understand. So your 1 and 2 is going to be established when you write your IEP goal. So that one, it's done. So then after that, you just plot them on the graph and connect the dots. So let's look at what this is going to look like. So for Emily, you have her, this is going to be her aim line for her reading goal. Okay, her baseline is 105 words per minute, correct words per minute. So I put my dot on the graph. Her goal is 195 words. Now, if you notice, I put it way to the end of the page, and the last data of the date that I have is 10/8. So when you're doing this, it's going to be at the end of that IEP cycle. So it's going to, because you're giving them a whole year to reach that goal. So just kind of know that, I mean, I ran out of room, but just know that the goal, that this part right here is going to be dotted at the end of the IEP cycle. So you have your 2 dots on your graph, and then you just connect those dots, and that is your aim line. Okay, this is done when your IEP is written. So the day that you write your IEP, you have your meeting, you have your goal, you can go ahead right now and draw your aim line, because that gives you a visual of how you can start going toward and what kind of progress that she needs to be making. Okay, so now let's look at some of her progress monitoring data points. We did, and if you notice, like I said earlier, I did, use different probes each week so that she doesn't get the same ones, but it's all on 5th grade. And I gave her, this is the assessor part, and she just had the story in front of her as she read them. So I gave her these, and what I did here is at 1 minute, then she ended on the word down. When the timer went off, down was the last word that she got. So I'm going to put a bracket right here. Okay. Now, what I also did, and then down at the bottom, it tells you exactly how to score this. So your total words read. Okay. So I know at the end of this line is 128. Well, she stopped here. So that's going to be 125. So I put 125 here, and then I have to subtract the number of errors that she made. So up here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's 5 slashes. But as she was reading the word important, she missed it at first, but then she self-corrected herself. So I just noted here that she did miss it, but she went back and self-corrected. So I'm not going to count that against her because she did that on her own without any prompts. So she has 4 errors. So I'm going to put 4 here. So 125 subtract 4 equals 121 correct words per minute. So that's your data point right there that you're going to plot. So I did this for 3 weeks. Each week I gave her this probe, and these are her scores. Okay, so as I do that, as I do my data points, then I'm going to plot them on my graph. Okay, well, she jumped up on that week 1, did really well. Now, as we look at this, we can see she is really kind of on target on that aim line. However, if I was looking at this, I'm going to have a little bit of a concern because she jumped up and did 121, but then she's kind of hovering. So I've been providing SDI for 3 weeks, and she's really not making any progress on that. So I want to do something a little bit different because we have got to get her moving. We've been doing this for 3 weeks. She's making 0 progress, really. So we got to do something different here. So I'm going to make an instructional change. Now, you're going to, you could just do your line and just mark an instructional change. So when you're looking at that graph, oh, I did a change right there. Now, when you look at in Infinite Campus, how you can document that is when it graphs it, it has like the date, and then there's a side on that says comments. In that comment section is where you would know what that instructional change, what did you do? What did you do differently? For example, did you introduce a chunking strategy for her? Whatever you did differently, that's what you're going to put for that. One example I read, and also those little comments on the side, they're there to help you. One I thought was a really good idea. A teacher had put this, he didn't score very well on it. The teacher put, student said this passage was boring. Okay, that's good to know. So what was that passage about? Was it about a flower garden? And the student could care, he thought that was boring to read about a flower garden. I want to note that and not give him anything about a flower garden. I want to get him something that he enjoys, and that's going to make a difference. So it's those little comment section is very useful for just little tidbits like that for you as well. But I love that one. I love when I saw that. I thought, oh, that's great. Okay, so we made our instructional change for Emily. Okay, then I'm going to go on 3 more weeks. So I'm providing that new instructional change, my new strategy that I implemented, and now I'm scoring each week, and she is starting to make a little bit of progress. So as I do my data points, I'm going to plot those. So after I made my instructional change, I plotted my next 3 weeks on here. So you can see she's starting to make progress. She is right on that aim line and progressing exactly where she needs to be. So for example, if you are on a 6 weeks grading period, you can show these parents, yeah, she's reading 138 words per minute. She's not where we want her to be. However, she is progressing and doing, she is on target to meet that goal as long as she continues to do what she's doing. So that's how you would plot those. Now, we're ready to draw our trend line for Emily. So the 6 steps for drawing a trend line is you have your baseline, and then you have a minimum of 6 data points, which we have. You're going to divide those data points in half. So we will be 3 and 3. Calculate the average for each one. So you're going to average the first 3 data points. You're going to get the average of the second 3 data points. And then you're going to put that total on the graph and draw a line. Now, I think it might be confusing if we're just reading this to get the steps, but I wanted to show you what the steps are, and then we're going to look at it on the graph and demonstrate that. So here's her information of what we use for Emily. I took the first 3 and got an average, which was 120. I took these and I got an average of 133. So then I plotted the average answer on the graph, and then I connected it, and then I went ahead and extended that line all the way out. So what that does is it shows you how she's trending, if she's trending toward her goal or not. So right now, even with 138, she is on the aim line, but based on her average, she is making progress, but she may not hit that goal as early as we think she might, but it gives you a clear picture to where she's headed. So that is your trend line. So then after we have all of that, we are ready. It's the end of the 6 weeks or the 9 weeks, the grading period, and we are ready to give a written analysis for Emily. So what we're doing is you're looking at this graph and you're going to explain what's going on here. One way to think about when you're writing your analysis is think about if you're not going to be able to be there to share that information with a parent or with another teacher or whoever that has the invested interest in Emily that needs to know about her progress, and you're not going to be there to explain it. Think about it in those terms, so that when all they can do when they pull up that progress report, they can look at it and read it and know exactly what they need to know about Emily. So as I'm looking at this, I'm going to say, okay, her baseline was 105. And her data point, she had an increase in fluency, but then her next 2 trials were minimal. So because of that, we did an instructional change of decoding strategies consisting of looking for known words, inside words, and chunking. And after this change, she had an increase of 9 points in 1 week. So after our instructional change, then she might continue to make progress. And I noted that her performance is currently trending below that aim line, but she is steadily making progress right now with the current chunking and looking for words inside known words. So right now, we're not making any instructional changes because, as we can see in that graph, right now, she's doing okay and continue to make that progress. So then I'm going to start back over. I'm providing that SDI. I'm going to continue to get that data. And as we see on here, if she continues to trend down, then I'm going to make that instructional change to get her start trending back upward to make that goal. So that was at the end of the reading example. So now we're going to move into the writing piece of it. Okay, so what you're going to do is you will need your pencil and paper, and this is just a writing project. And I want you to write, is it better to vacation during summer or winter break? And in your writing, I want you to include a topic sentence, 3 reasons, 3 explanations, and an ending. What you guys just did is called a quick write. Okay, this is something that you can use in your classroom. So what is it? Okay, it's a short, informal, timed written response to a specific topic. Now they could, quick writes can range from, you could do 3 minutes up to 10, usually is a normal time to do a quick write. And it could be something like I just did, or if you want, you know, if you do it in your social studies class or some kind of, you know, just to tie it back to something that you are, a topic that you're teaching that day. So it could, whatever the topic prompt that you want them to do, you can. When do you use it? You can use it prior to learning, before, during, or after. So before, it's used to do, to activate that, their background knowledge or their prior knowledge. And to do that is if you're wanting to introduce a topic for something, then if you want to create or have the students tune in to some background knowledge that they have that would help them in understanding the content that they're about to learn, then you can use that. And also during the learning, just in the middle, just do something really quick. They can make that personal connection, and it makes the learning more meaningful for them, which will help them hold it and learn it and be able to store it in their long term and be able to utilize that in their other classes. And then after learning, you can use it to assess, to see if, you know, did they get what you wanted them, you know, their target for the day or the skill. You can use it for assessing. So quick writes is an easy task that you can use for writing. Okay, so now going back to the writing rubric, which would be an indirect measure, let's look at this rubric, and I want you to score your writing using this rubric. So, and what we're looking at is idea development for this. So this is, we're not really looking at conventions, we're, you know, the spelling and punctuation, things like that. Not really concerned about that right now. What we want to focus on is the idea development. So look at this rubric and score your paper based on this rubric. And once you do that, and if you're doing that with your students, what you want to do is, okay, it would be hard to graph a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on a graph and be able to explain that. So what you can do is, when you're looking at this, is change it into the percentages. So if it's broken down into 4 sections, and if number 4 exceeds the expectations, then you can give them a 100. So, and then you can break it down into the different percentages based on your rubric. Okay, so now let's look at Emily's writing goal. When presented with a writing prompt, Emily will write a response that includes an introduction and conclusion, points to support the main idea, and questions and paraphrases from appropriate sources with 75% accuracy on 3 consecutive sessions as measured by a weekly writing rubric. So what I did is the rubric that we just looked at that you all use to score your paper, what I wanted to see from her or from you guys was in that rubric. That was her goal. So I took her goal, I made my rubric based on that because that's what I needed her to be able to do. And I got the 75% because if the 75% meets those expectations, and if she gets 100, fantastic, but we at least want her to get that 75%. So that's how I got my goal, and tie that into how I'm going to measure my goal based on that rubric. Okay, so here are some data points. So we have been providing SDI for Emily, and we've been assessing, and these are the scores that we've gotten for her, and her baseline is 25%. Okay, so now I went through the reading and did all the graphing and all of those, and the aim line and the trend line. Now I'm going to let you guys take the writing goal and let you guys practice graphing it yourself. Okay, so on your paper, here is your task. On the side, you have Emily's writing data, and I just copied that over there so that you can have it, not have to have it memorized, and just sketch out your graph like I've got here. And I want you to draw Emily's aim line and draw her trend line and then analyze it with a written response. So, you know, and so you may or may not need to make instructional changes. If you do, note that in there. So take this information and do this activity, and I'm going to quit talking and let you work and think. Okay, so what I'll do is on the next slide, well, the answer, I guess. And of course, as far as the analysis, you know, there's more than one way to write your analysis. I'm going to show you an example of what this could look like. And then you can compare your graph and your analysis to what I come up with and just see how it matches. So this is what I came up with for Emily's writing. So I'll give you just a minute or two to look at that, look at yours, look at mine, and read the analysis and just see how that compares up. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, but it gives you an example of what this is going to look like. If you notice on one thing I wanted to point out, that she had a dip in between 827 and 93. So especially when somebody is looking at a graph and they see that the student is like Emily on this one, she's all over the place. And then there was she had done really well and was making progress, staying at 50%. And then all of a sudden she dropped down. Well, whoever's looking at this is going to want to know why that happened. So that's something that you definitely need to note in your analysis. So if you notice in mine, what I put that she, when she started out between her baseline, and then she'd started out at 25, and then we've been doing some strategies for 2 weeks, and she had made no progress. So I wanted to go ahead and provide that instructional change. So then I listed what that strategy was that I started implementing, which was the POW tree strategy. If you're not familiar with that, I would love to talk about writing strategies with you so we don't have time to go into that today because we're focusing on progress monitoring, but I would love to talk about some writing strategies as well. So if you want more information about that, you can reach out to me in the email and we can talk about those. So I did the writing strategy of the POW tree. And then once I started doing this, she started making progress, and then it dropped. She went from 50 down to 25 within a week. Well, because of that, I noted on here, she did drop, but she had been absent for several days. So that is why, or that would be a reason of why that she would drop, because she wasn't there to receive her SDI. And so we continued with her SDI, and then she scored a 75% for that data point. And then we determined that those are working. And so at this time, we do not need to make any additional instructional strategies. Once she got that POW tree mnemonic strategy, she's been doing okay. So, and now had she dropped to 25, and I noted that she had been absent, and so the next week she was not absent anymore, and she continued to stay at 25 or didn't do as well, then I would go ahead and go, well, maybe it wasn't the absenteeism, or maybe the absenteeism caused a setback, and either way, she wasn't making progress. So I'm going to have to do something different and provide a different strategy. So had she not scored better that following week, I would have done a different instructional strategy. But this just gives you an example of an explanation of what's going on with Emily and her writing. So how did you guys do? Was anybody like to share out how your graph is compared to this one, or any new findings that you found, or anything that you would like to share?
Okay. Yeah, there is a question, Chastity.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question about how did you get the 33% and the 50%? on your, in your analysis piece.
Oh, okay. So the 33% that's the trend line. So you take your first three, I had my 6 data points, and then I divided them into halves. So you know what, I did not, that's my trend line, and I did not have that listed there. So I took my 25, 25, and 50, and I added those together and got my average, which was 33. And then I took 50, 25, and 75, and I took my average, and that came up to 50. So I plotted those on the graph to get the average. And so then I connected my dots here, and that is the trend line. So that's showing how Emily is actually trending toward reading her or meeting her writing goal. So that's what those numbers are. They're the average of the data points.
Okay, so she says thank you, and that she understood that. Chastity, I love that discussion that you just had. As we review records and look at progress monitoring data, which is an issue across the state, one of the things that we find is sometimes we might have the graph, but that real deep discussion about the analysis, just where you're talking about, on that data point on 9.3, how it drops significantly. We do want to talk about those and have those discussions when we look at that progress data, and then look again that we increase back to 75%. So I just think that's something, we were looking at a record the other day, and that was one of the things we were trying to figure out. How do you have that discussion? What does that look like? And where do you put that in your analysis? And so if you do use Infinite Campus, the goal monitoring tab in Infinite Campus, there's a place that you can write and discuss that. But that is one piece that it's easily overlooked because of the way that it's graphed. So I love that you provided that analysis. And so anytime we see those increases or decreases in student performance, that's a good thing to stop and look at and try to understand why the students performing either above or below what we were anticipating.
I want to thank you guys today, and I am looking forward to seeing you guys again. So we appreciate it. Thank you.